So tell us, you know, parents listening to this, and I know I very much come from a very physiological and sort of point of view on, you know, pregnancy, motherhood, breastfeeding, wherever possible and however possible, introducing the biologically sound pathway to these things. But we know we're living such a fragmented life, so very difficult to be able to implement. So do you have some tips for that? A lot of people with children with autism, neurodiversity, or have questions whether their children are in the process of getting diagnosis. What can they do today, right now, to help themselves in their family? We know if they're listening to this podcast, it's because they know that sugar is a problem. They're going into their cupboards, they're getting rid of all of that. What do you say to parents are things that where can they start on this journey in terms of giving the best nutrition they can afford to their children who they might think might need maybe a bit of help or have already been diagnosed?
She froze, but I think she finished, right?
Mhm.
I'll wait till she comes on. Okay.
Come back.
Best advice, kind of where to start off.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, two things. One, I will say the parent needs to start with themselves. They need to do their own self-parenting and their own emotional and personal development. Because if you are making decisions from a wounded 7-year-old yourself, you're going to continue to make bad choices because you don't have any control or self-restraint, or you're stuffing your own face to deal with unresolved emotions or issues. So it is critical, and you can't expect a parent to suddenly become emotionally mature just because they had a child, right? So if you have eating habits or drinking habits or things that you are seeking out things to cover up feelings, to numb out, to dissociate because you can't handle things, go get some help, right? You know, it's go talk to somebody. Start investigating why that. If you're walking around with 100 pounds on you, most likely you're going to develop a child that has an extra 100 pounds. You're going to turn them into a type 2 diabetic by the time they're 10 years old. That's really unacceptable. Then we know they're going to, you know, maybe get their foot cut off by the time they're 20. Then we know they're going to have anxiety and depression. We know they'll probably have a heart attack by the time they're 35. That is unacceptable. It is 100% coming from what a parent buys for a child to put in their mouth. But if the parent is making decisions like a wounded 10-year-old, there's only so much I can do. So one, I would say take some responsibility and up level yourself, because your children are absorbing everything that you are experiencing. You can think you're hiding it all you want. You are not. So it is a time for you to look at some personal development. There's courses you can take. There's books you can buy. There's online groups. There's all kinds of amazing things at this point. Now, when it comes down to some education, one, I'll say you want to go for a low insulin driving, low blood sugar type diet. The easiest is to make it be, it's meat based. We can say just a meat based diet. Now, if you want to get more complicated, my favorite approach is the GAPS diet by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. She's over there with you guys. She's a genius. The GAPS diet is our standard gold standard for autism. And we start there. That often can seem overwhelming to people at first, but it's extraordinary. I've seen full recovery. I've been doing GAPS diet for 25 years. My own nephew and everybody else, I have seen full autism recoveries with that diet alone. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you're going to do that. I like to stack that with neurofeedback. I say you look up neurofeedback, find a board certified practitioner. Marty Wutke, I believe, is in England, and he's a genius. So if he's there, I'd find that, I think he came over to Europe. He's somebody who trained me here in Georgia, but he moved to England, I believe. But look up neurofeedback. It's extraordinary at changing the structure and function of the brain. But you have to have good nutrition. And that is what I just said. Cholesterol, saturated fat, and protein. The human body is animal protein, animal fat, and minerals. There's only 2,000 calories of carbohydrates in it in the form of a little bit of glucose and a little bit of glycogen stored in the muscles and liver. You don't need. There are essential fatty acids and essential amino acids. That means we have essential fats we must eat, We have essential proteins we must eat. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Your body never needs to eat a carbohydrate in its life, and it can have optimal health. There are millions of people who live this way and have lived this way forever. They wouldn't know what a pancake was if you threw it up against their head, because they've never seen one. They don't shop in grocery stores. They hunt and fish. That's all they do. And in Siberia, there are no vegetables to forage. It's snow. And you know the average lifespan of 2 tribes up there? 140 years old.
Wow.
They're carnivores. So I love the GAPS diet. I also love the carnivore diet. I use carnivore a lot in autism, MS, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, schizophrenia. The Russians have been doing this a very long time, decades and decades and decades. They just didn't call it carnivore. It's just animal-based. Yeah. And even the GAPS diet has a strong carnivore angle now. So you want to start there. I never make a child eat a vegetable. They don't need to eat them. They don't do anything for them. Who cares if they don't like? They don't like them for a reason, because they're disgusting and they're full of anti-nutrients. Who gives a crap if they want broccoli? They want the salmon. So give them a variety of meat, eggs, fish to try. Let them learn to cook with you. Have them eat that first. I may say eat all the protein first. And the protein has the fat. Cook it in a ton of butter, duck tallow, beef tallow. Don't use any seed oils. Do not use soybean oil. Do not use canola oil. That is weaving itself into the neurological matrix, and it's causing short circuiting. It's like putting bad wire. Your wires in the house should be copper. It's like somebody comes in and every now and then puts aluminum instead. So you wonder why the lights are flickering sometimes. That's what seed oils are doing inside the nervous system. They're causing seizures. They're causing ADHD. They're causing anxiety and panic. Every fast food meal is cooked in a seed oil. Every restaurant is cooking in a seed oil. So I would encourage you to start cooking. Get a crock pot, get an air fryer. You can put a frozen food in the air fryer and the thing will be done in 5 minutes. Put a chunk of meat with some broth, salt and pepper, some onions, because it flavors it, in a crock pot. 8 hours later, it's delicious. Okay? All that other food people are doing is because of money. It's peasant food. They've convinced you potatoes and rice and bread are good for you. No, they're not. So buy the meat on sale. If you can invest by going to a farmer and buying a quarter cow or a half cow, or going in with 4 neighbors and getting a whole cow and having a freezer, that is the cheapest way to get meat. You just need the money up front, but one cow will feed a family of 4 all year long.
Yeah.
One death will feed everybody all year. That's it.
Yeah.
You have a freezer full of it, you're good to go. Okay, so that's what people don't understand. The convenience food is nothing calories. It's way more expensive, actually. But you can find the meat on sale. You can go to, I don't know if you guys have like Costco, Sam's Club. We have warehouses and stuff that get it on sale. You go in and be like, what's the sale meat? And you look for the specials. Okay, that's the half price. Buy whatever's on sale. Get the eggs. I know everything has gone up here. The eggs have, but I have chickens. I invested in chickens. If you want some chickens, it's not like it's cheap, but it's not $10 a dozen. So I would start there. GAPS diet. If you want more information, look at carnivore. I'm telling you, and believe it or not, you need to eat less food than you realize, because the system is looking for nitrogen. So if you're eating cakes and donuts and pizza and whatever, it's going to keep being hungry for 2 reasons. You're spiking glucose and spiking insulin. Insulin's job is to store energy and store fat. So it keeps storing fat, storing energy, and it actually makes you hungry. Then you have this drop. So it's a big problem in itself, but then you don't have enough nitrogen. You're looking for the protein. The body has a protein limit it's trying to hit because it needs protein. What is bone? Protein. What is muscle? Protein. What is my skin? Protein. My teeth? Protein. This is all protein. This is not a carbohydrate. Do you know how hard it is to turn this into this from broccoli? It's very hard. It requires an obscene amount of enzymes, an obscene amount of minerals and fat. It's too hard. Why would I waste all my energy doing that? Just eat the meat, and so I can convert it very quickly. So it's looking for the protein, the amino acids, the essential amino acids that you must get from eating meat. And then the nitrogen. That's a nitrogen hypothesis theory. So it's going to keep being hungry until it gets it. Well, it's amazing when people they eat one big steak and a few eggs. Like, I don't need to eat all day. A lot of people eat one time a day because they're full. The average American in 1950 ate 1.5 meals a day because they were farming. They had a huge, big meal and a one little snack. Like, I don't need it anymore. And why is that? Because they had all the nutrients they needed. Plus, they're running on their fat from ketones. They're burning fat. Most people don't need to eat for 10, 15 days. I've had patients I fasted. The longest water fast I've ever taken a patient through, I think, was 5 months. Wow. You got 100 pounds on you. You don't need to eat food. You got a whole refrigerator on you. You got a freezer full of fat, full of energy. What do you need to eat for?
It's amazing.
Right? So I'm just giving you an idea. Like, people, you know what I mean? They get so worried. Oh, but he won't eat. Let me be real clear. No child is going to starve himself. So they give him chicken nuggets or a piece of pizza. I'm like, they're not going to starve themselves. They just manipulated you. Little children they're limbic brains, pure emotion, and they're masters of manipulation. They played you. You got played by a 2-year-old. Who's in charge? Who is in charge? What do you mean you went to McDonald's? What? Are you 50 or are you 5? Be a grown up. How about that? There's my.
Yeah. I love it. How long did it take you once you started kind of removing all the sort of foods that were causing kind of problems to you? How long after that, and after your recovery from COVID, which some people have taken such a long time to recover from, how long after that did you find that you started to feel better when you focused on better nutrition?
So I actually went to the bookstore one day because I was kind of like desperate, to find an answer. And since I wasn't getting answers from doctors, I found this one book and I learned so much information about, swapping out certain things and incorporating a lot more fruits and veggies. And there were recipes in there. So in the book, it recommended to do 90 days where you're eliminating certain foods. So it was like the dairy, the gluten, the refined sugar, even eggs. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. This is going to be so hard for me because I love my sweets and I love, certain things, but I'm just going to do it. So I kept a journal and I basically journaled every day what I ate and my symptoms and how I was feeling. And I would say, within 3 months or even less, well, definitely within the first couple of weeks, I noticed certain improvements right away. Like my energy was better. I was sleeping better. But by 3 months, I noticed that a lot of my other symptoms, like I had some like neurological symptoms, like neuropathy and things like that, that started to clear up as well. So I would say, a solid 3 months is probably what I would recommend if somebody's really trying to, change their diet and eliminate things and just see how your body reacts from that.
In terms of your approach to this, so if I was a patient walking up to your clinic and you were going to sort of give me the first talk, because we like to break things down to really simple things in this podcast and in this show, so that just to help people kind of take something away. So where do I start with this? And let's just say I'm having a standard Western diet, massive plates of rice, little teeny bit of meat, lots of veggies. Where do I start and making adjustments into my nutrition to make it optimal according to your findings?
Got it. Okay, so step 1, for sure, protein awareness. You have to know how much protein is in everything you're eating. And then not only how much protein is in that, but how many carbs and fats came along for the ride. My candy bar has 20 grams of protein and it advertises, 20 grams of protein. Great, but it's, 500 calories. And so that's a horrible protein percent. I'm actually not going to get any leaner as I eat it. But my super, fitness inspired Quest bar or something might have 20 grams of protein for only 200 calories. And that's a much higher protein percent. I'm going to get closer to my goals instead of farther away. So you really want to start with understanding what is in your food when it comes to protein and non-protein energy. So look at all the labels. Google it if what you're eating doesn't have a label. Look at the grams of protein And then look at the grams of carbs and fats. Ideally, you want the protein grams to be higher than the carb grams, higher than the fat grams, maybe even higher than the carb and fat grams together. You're just looking for protein to be the dominant macronutrient. Every time you eat, it should be centered on a protein. Every meal, every snack, the protein should basically be dominant. It should be the star of the show. You should be aware of how much protein you're getting, and also the protein percent and how many carbs and fats you are forced to eat in the process of getting that protein. So your chicken nuggets, have 5 grams of protein and then 50 grams of carbs and 50 grams of fat, and it's a horrible ratio, and it's just a ridiculously low protein to energy ratio or protein percentage by calories. And so you want to maybe eat leaner proteins. The easiest way to do this is to always buy the leanest protein you can get. And the reason you do that is because it's trivially easy to add carbs and fats later. If I just buy the leanest ground beef, I can always, cook it in butter, cook it in oil, add a bunch of cheese, add a bunch of sauces, throw a bunch of condiments on there, have a side dish that's always going to be carbs or fat or both. So it's so easy to add on carbs and fats, but it's really tough to subtract them when you started with the fattiest, worst protein you can get. So like your very cheap grocery store hot dog or something is going to have horrible macros. It might have 5 grams of protein and, 20 grams of fat. It might be just actually low protein food, even though it's zero carb and it's carnivore and it's keto. It might have a terrible protein percentage or protein energy ratio. So you want to know how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbs and fats. You're trying to get the protein grams higher than the carbs or fats, if possible, or as high as you can get. And you want to basically buy the leanest proteins you can get, because you will be adding carbs and fats to them in the cooking process and the sides and the condiments and the everything else. You know what I'm saying? So I basically buy the leanest proteins I can get. It sounds boring and horrible and terrible, but I'm literally buying extra lean ground beef. I'm buying skinless chicken breast. I'm buying low fat or non-fat dairy. I'm buying all sorts of lean proteins because it's very easy to add carbs and fats to them. I probably will be. So it's like, understand how many grams of protein is in your food. Pick something with a lot of protein. Pick something with a high protein percentage. Higher protein and fiber, lower carbs and fats. That's basically the name of the game. And but like I said, it really starts with protein awareness. My patients are like, we do this 24-hour diet recall, and I'm like, what did you eat yesterday? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, go. Breakfast, they're like, well, I always eat an egg every morning for breakfast, every morning, because I know protein's important. Yeah, that's 6 grams of protein. You probably want 30 to 50 grams of protein per meal. And eating protein at the first meal of your day is probably most important, especially if you're trying to eat less downstream. So everyone's failing at breakfast. Nobody's eating enough protein for breakfast. I'm having, either a whey shake or a protein shake or non-fat Greek yogurt that's low carb and low fat, or some sort of egg white scramble, maybe 2 eggs and a half cup of egg whites. I'm adding protein if I have to. I'm getting the leanest proteins I can. I'm upping the protein percentage. You're literally just going to eat hundreds of grams of carbs and fat less, or calories from carbs and fat less over the day if you do that. We have a bunch of studies on this. If you drink a protein shake 30 minutes before each meal, you just literally eat less calories every time you eat. If you front load all this protein either before a meal, at the beginning of a meal, earlier in the day, if you get this protein sooner, you're going to eat less downstream carbs and fats. And all these people are like, well, I can't eat that much protein, I'm full. And I'm like, what are you eating? Oh, it's this super fatty ribeye that's actually way more grams of fat than protein. And I'm like, yeah, you shouldn't try to force yourself to eat that and get more protein. That's bad. Don't eat when you're not hungry. You literally want to eat these leaner proteins first, and that's how it's done. You know what I mean? So many people are like, oh, I couldn't eat, all this protein, and they're really just eating something that has at least as much fat as protein in it or more.
You're seeing so many of our guests, amazing guests we've had, just like you on the show, that are talking about sort of food addiction and these kinds of very difficult to break cycles. So are you also helping people to kind of make choices that start to help and support that transition to a kind of healthier eating model, which is more, harmonious with the
Yeah.
body and the choices that they're making.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was just talking to somebody else about this, or somebody else today about this. A lot of times when it comes to binging and emotional eating too, it's happening like at the end of the day when we are so tapped out from trying to have all this self-control all day to like restrict. Like we're typically just under eating. And then by the end of the day, our body's like, you need to give me quite a bit more than you have. So we're going to do that now. And I'm going to make you think about food and push you towards food until you finally do give me food. And then the floodgates are open and it's going to be really hard for you to stop, So that is always like, first and foremost, we want to be sure that nutrition wise, you're eating enough, and you're eating enough of the right balance of things, like we can't just be eating protein or just be eating carbs or whatever. Like there needs to be a great balance. You need to have fiber in your diet, healthy fats, proteins, and carbs, giving you all the balance so that your body doesn't get to a place where it feels like it's missing something and then trying to push you to get that thing in. So if we get all of our bases covered there on the nutrition and the diet front, then it helps us to better diagnose and correct anything that's more emotion based and emotion focused. So yeah, it's so funny because I feel like 80 to 90% of the time, once we fix that nutrition piece, like, hey, let's just be sure you're eating enough. You don't need to like try to live off of 300 calories a day. Please don't do that. Then it's like, oh, I don't binge anymore. It's like, shocker, like now your body doesn't have this insane survival instinct kick in at night trying to get you to eat enough so that you can just survive throughout the day.
I think also one of the things that when I used to competitively cycle, it was a big revelation to me that I found out that there were 5 times the calories in a fat molecule to a carbohydrate molecule. For me, that was groundbreaking news. So fueling from fat, and also particularly coconut oil, which is in between carbohydrate and fat in terms of the way your body metabolizes it. And those are some of the things that I found out, fairly recently. And it's important that we share stories like that.
Yeah, I think especially for ultra endurance athletes. I mean, even if you go to a marathon, and this isn't, once again, I'm speaking freely. This isn't being judgmental. This is just being my observation. Yeah. A lot of people running marathons are overweight. And I remember thinking that's very interesting because if it was purely calories in, calories out, everybody should be lean and fit, right? Because you're running, you're training maybe on the low end, 20 to 30 miles a week, on the high end, maybe 60, 70 plus miles a week. And so the question was like, what's happening? Why are people fat that are running marathons? But what I saw, certainly I appreciate as an athlete, is just how important insulin is. And like, I know Dr. Bickman, Dr. Barry, Dr. Hampton, a lot of us that are on the American Diabetes Society board, one of our beliefs and hypothesis is disease is just hyperinsulinemia. We just have too much glucose, too much insulin. The human body, the poor pancreas was not meant to secrete insulin so often. And so what is somebody, let's just say a woman who's like, all right, I'm going to go train for a marathon, maybe wants to lose a few pounds. But what is she told to do? Well, have carbohydrates before you run. What happens when you have carbohydrates before you run? You have a blood glucose response, insulin, can't oxidize fat. Right. Insulin suppresses fatty acid oxidation like nobody's business. It's like falling off a cliff. It's not like it slowly titrates down. I wish people taught this. And what does that mean? That if I cannot burn fat when I run, about 20 to 30 minutes into my exercise, I have to take in more. That's why they have those goos and gels and Gatorades. We should be able to burn our own body fat. The human body, we want to be metabolically flexible, meaning we want to burn both fat and carbohydrates. But when you follow a low carbohydrate diet, or when you even train your body to, run fasted, or to, if you're doing really long runs, at least wait till 45 minutes to an hour into your run to start taking carbs, you can oxidize so much more fat. And all of us have unlimited fat. Even super duper duper lean people theoretically have enough fat. I think it's, it's several marathons you could do back to back to back. but we just don't train our body to do that. So we have the general population taking in carbohydrates before activity, during activity, after activity, all day long. And then we have the general population who's not active taking in carbohydrates before, during, like all day long. And we can't pretend to be dumbfounded that society is overweight, depressed, and just miserable when we literally are causing insulin responses all day long.
So for people listening out there that perhaps aren't really, that have not got a background in any type of sport, where can they kind of start? Because you know how it feels to be right at that bottom emotionally and mentally,
Yeah.
to sort of pick yourself up. Can you kind of inspire us? Because I know that you are somebody who really wants to kind of give back in that way. Give us inspiration and some tips for what can they do when they're in that rock bottom place and then it gets going.
Yeah, so definitely reach out and speak to someone, like literally anyone, just to try and get yourself a little bit out of that dark place. And if you're thinking about, perhaps getting into some form of exercise, which I totally recommend, I think the best thing to do is to find a like-minded individual, or somebody maybe that's doing it already and who wants to come out and join you in whatever activity you want to do, because it's a lot easier if you can get out with someone else. You arrange a time and a place, and even if the weather's rubbish, you just get there because they're going to be waiting on you, and you always feel fantastic once you've done whatever it is you're going to do, even if it's in terrible weather. So yeah, I think that's it. It's finding somebody to meet up to do something with, and also trying to set yourself a goal. It doesn't have to be a massive goal. It's like, even just like a 10-minute walk down the road or something like that, just anything at all, and to an initial goal that you can work towards. You take that off and then think, oh, right, okay, I'm ready to go on to whatever the next level of goal is.
Yeah. It's like taking that first step is sometimes the hardest thing, isn't it?
It is. I'd say it's always the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And and I always say, make baby steps, little things, like you said, a 10-minute walk that's not too onerous, and then you get into that habit, don't they? And they say that if you can do something consistently for, say, 30 days, that then is a habit, because you're then, and 3 times a week, I would say, a good place to start.
It's also making it something that is kind of like quite easy to do anyway. So it's not, take, for example, swimming. It's a little bit more difficult because it's subject that you've got to go to the pool, you've got to have the swimming kit, and you've got to find a time where the pool's open and so on. But so that might be a bit more awkward to get into, but yeah, just getting outside, like, and doing like a walk or a little jog or something like that is probably the easiest thing to start with, I would say.
Tell us about this relationship that you had around food and comfort, and how has that developed as you've into adulthood?
Yeah, now working with clients, I'd say the worst thing I hear that people do on diets, like our bad diets they've done in the past, is they've isolated themselves, right? Like they're getting meal delivery, they have to eat the same 4 foods, they have to cut everything out. So then they're declining invitations to go out with friends at restaurants. They're not going to parties, they're saying no to things. And that never resonated with me, because I'm an extrovert. I love people. I'm extremely social. I'm married also, that is very social. We have extrovert kids who like to go to parties and never avoid things. And so I think I always had this philosophy that, like, I could have my cake and eat it too. Like, I really, like, there is a positive approach to weight loss that I can get to. And I might not eat the same exact food as everyone around me, but that's okay. And I think everyone needs to lean in on what they find comforting. Like, I find it to be comforted to be full and satisfied. I'm not comforted by feeling deprived, and I think people do this thing where they try to pretend like they have no emotional connection to food, right? They try to pretend like, I just want to be skinny, and when I'm skinny, I'll be happy. So I'm going to avoid social interactions. I'm going to decline invitations to parties and restaurants with friends, and I'm going to lose all this weight. But that person is always set up to fail, because eventually that person's going to realize, like, they're not happy along the way. And so I still have a very emotional connection to food. Food still makes me very, very happy. It's just that I've changed the definition of what happy food is. And I have become very clear with the fact that the ultra processed, like highly refined carbs and lots of sugar that I used to think made me happy were actually fueling more sadness. And now when I find this like better for you pumpkin pie recipe that I made yesterday, and the serving size is gigantic. The serving size is a quarter of a pie. And when I get to eat this gigantic like pumpkin pie thing and call it a breakfast because it has 23 grams of protein and it's, 380 so calories and it's low in sugar, it has fiber, like it's the best of every world. Like I really have grown to love these foods and it makes me feel good in my body. It is that win-win. So I'm not an emotional eater now. I think food still brings me a lot of joy and comfort, but it's just a different relationship.
Oh my goodness. For the people that are listening, and we have listeners from across the world, all over the place, and they are listening in, we want them to start having these conversations and just kind of open up those conversations across the kitchen tables. And I know that you mentioned start small, but if somebody's just feeling absolutely overwhelmed, they're like, I've got all of this going on, I've got a family history of diabetes and all of things, where can they start? What is the first thing that you would do for them if you were just giving them a little bit of education today in terms of where to start with this journey?
For someone like that, I would really just have a heart-to-heart with them and ask them what their goals are. What are your goals? And then, based off whatever they say, then I'll be like, all right, well, let's start with this. I think it's really up to, I have all the tools in my toolbox and I can tell you a million things to do, but it really comes down to, what do you hold in your heart and your brain and what's important to you? Do you want to lose the weight? Do you want to have more energy? Do you want to just sleep better? Like, what is it that's most important for you? Because there's a lot going on, right? Usually these people have multiple symptoms. So it's like, what is the most important for you? And then we usually start there. Sometimes I might require or say like, hey, we got to work on some past trauma. A lot of it could be unresolved emotions or something that happened in the past that's, another obstacle to cure. Is that subconscious brain is so powerful that you got to work through that, especially when it comes to food and diet. I see a lot of people that have had some, significant trauma in the past with food that's still affecting them, and I'm like, well, I can't help you with that. You've got to go internal and work on that, but it can be fixed. And a lot of times they don't realize that they can, help with that. So if there's someone struggling with diet, I'm always like, how can I support you with this? What are you looking for me to help you with? Because I can do whatever you want. I just want to make sure that whatever I recommend is something that is okay for you and something that you can, do, and that's easy for you and for you to comply with and, sustain. So that's usually how I address it, is again, meeting them where they're at.
Amazing. It must feel like having a great big hug coming into your office. And there must be also a lot of tears of
oh yeah,
feeling really
I had that a couple of weeks ago. She goes, no one has ever been so kind about that with me. And I'm like, well, I don't want to say you can't do this. That's not fair to you. It's not fair to me. Like, I'm not your dictator. I'm here to support you. So let me know how can I support you? What are you looking for me to help you with? Because I can provide whatever you want. I just don't know exactly what it's going to be for you and what you need.
CrossFit. Now, I know that people talk about CrossFit and they talk about it. Somebody said to me, you need to start because it becomes like a religion. I was like, really? People get really mad and get really, really passionate about CrossFit. Tell us about, for most people that don't know about CrossFit, please tell us about it and what made you, what was it about that got you into becoming a professor at a college? I mean, it's a big jump from loving a sport to getting right into the science of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess before I say that, what have you heard about CrossFit besides that people love it?
It's really hard.
So, okay.
And I don't know very much more. That is all I know.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I started when I was in Beijing and I was in China. And at the time, there were maybe 2 gyms in the whole country of 1.4 billion people. It was a lot more popular in Europe and in North America, but it was starting to grow. It was starting to pick up, and it was an interesting time where there were the people who were competitive and wanted to compete. CrossFit, essentially, it's a mix of all different kinds of movements, modalities. It's a hodgepodge of things from swimming to running to weightlifting to gymnastics, trying to get at like when you say like, oh, is that person fit? That can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. CrossFit was sort of trying to define that. Their tagline is finding the fittest on earth. So in all ways of that, testing all different kinds of time domains. So you might have people run a half marathon and the same people and then go do a max effort lift. So not the type of things that is generally being combined in most sports. A lot of training for CrossFit will look similar to what professional athletes do for strength and conditioning. But for CrossFit, that's the sport, is the strength and conditioning part. It's just the training. And so it's an interesting sort of almost gamification of that. What I think is one of its benefits, in addition to just kind of being interesting, each class is something different. Every time you go in, you're doing maybe learning a new movement or testing yourself in a different way, seeing how much you've improved, seeing what you haven't improved at when you want to work on more. One of the things that, and this isn't just CrossFit, but I think CrossFit largely popularized it, is this idea of community and how important that is to keeping people coming back. I mean, it's what most people are looking for. It's what most people need. It helps form those habits and those connections. It keeps you accountable. So whether that's, things like a book club, a lot of people aren't going to read on their own, but if they know in 2 weeks, I need to meet up with a group of people and talk about it, they're going to read the book. Same idea here. If they know, oh, these people are going to be in class and they're going to ask me where I was if I wasn't there, all right, I'll go. So I think that it's not just CrossFit that does that, but CrossFit does it particularly well. And I really like that aspect of being able to introduce fitness and exercise and health to people from all different backgrounds, to dancers, to cyclists, to people who had never done anything before, yogis. And people could come in and bring their strengths. Someone who, let's say you're a dancer, so maybe your coordination and your flexibility is better than most other people's. You come in and you can do a lot of the movements that people who have been at CrossFit for years maybe not be able to do. That's pretty cool. Everyone comes in with their own strengths, and to add that to the mix.
So we don't want to create that environment of shame around food, but if the manufacturers, I think that's the thing, the decoupling, I don't know what you think about this, Naveed, but the decoupling of blame culture on the people, the consumers who are really, they're stressed out. I can give you like a scenario: a stressed out parent having to work maybe 2 jobs to feed the family of children, eating snacks on the go all day long. So many of our healthcare colleagues as well, they're overworked on the wards. They've got maybe a chocolate bar in their pocket. They don't get a lunch break. And, if they can shove that piece of chocolate in their mouth whilst they're having a cup of tea.
Calories, exactly.
It's just whatever they can. And then how on earth can we judge those people? We can't, because they're so stressed out. But the manufacturers of the food and the policymakers that support those big industries should be certainly taking a long, hard look at what they've done over the last 2 or 3 decades. Those statistics are staggering, absolutely staggering. What do you think about that?
No, they are, and I'm not a politician, so I don't really know. I don't have the power to make changes. None of us individually do. But you're completely correct. The reality is, the evidence that this is people's fault is now going. So manufacturers now need to realize the truth is starting to become more apparent. That it's the obesogenic environment, it's what you've put in front of us has led to this problem. And we wrote a paper in 2006. I wrote it with my brilliant colleague Mike Lean and a few other colleagues. And in that paper, we wrote, what is provided is what is eaten. So what is provided has to change. Yes. That's like almost 20 years ago. And we have to change. We have to change. If we want people, I'll say this again, without much conscious effort to lead healthy lifestyles, we have to provide an environment which propels much healthier foods. Yes, they can still make a profit and far less unhealthier foods. So it's easier for people to gravitate towards better healthy foods. It does mean, though, that food industry has to accept to make less profit per capita volume, whatever. They have to accept that. And if they're not willing to do that, well, we know what the consequences are.